Hi, so for our next section, we'll be talking about variables. Variables are a core fundamental to programming, and it's like the memory of a microbit, right? So, you know how we have conscious memory in our brain? The microbit too has memory, and its memory works by using variables, in fact. So, we can think about variables sort of like a container here. So, I have a box here, a resealable Tupperware style box, and how I'm going to demonstrate variables is you can store anything in it, right? Like, you know how we can put a pen, like for instance, inside the box, or you can put a roll of tape, for example, in the box, or maybe a Lego brick, like anything, right? The same way, when we program, we can put many types of data. They're called data types, and we'll cover that in a couple of videos. But we can put different data types within our code. So we can store strings. Strings are basically just text, right? Like for our last project, we showed hello world, or you might have shown your name, or whatever text you showed. We can show that. So that's one type of data that we can put inside a variable. So the variable, the container is for the microbit. Or we can put stuff like numbers. So they're called integers. So we can put the numbers, whole numbers such as 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. We can put something called booleans. Booleans are basically true and false statements. So we can put a true or a false inside these variables. And by doing so, we give our program conscious memory. Like in the last video, we just talked about how you might have a wallet and you want to know how much money saved. So you'd use a variable and you'd use the onStart block and put in like say $5 when you begin, and every time you go shopping you spend. And then how does the microbit know how much money you have? Well, the microbit code will reference, so look inside this container and see, okay, how many what integer value stored in here. So that's why variables are very important. So for our next step, we're going to actually write some code that uses variables. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to create a calculator for the microbit. So depending on the inputs and outputs, you can change the values of the variables that is stored in here, sort of like how a calculator can add, subtract, divide, or multiply. So yeah, let's go on over to our programming interface. We're going to create a new project. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the variables tab. As you can see, the variables tab is the second last one right above math. And there's only one option to begin with, make a variable. So yeah, click that, and we're going to call this number. Again, you're welcome to call this variable anything you want. You can call it literally anything. It's like a name, right? You can give someone a different name, but that doesn't change who they are. It's sort of like a label, right? So yeah, I'm just going to say number, and as soon as I click OK, you'll see three options pop up here. Number, set number to blank, change number by blank. So what we'll do is we'll start with the set number, and what we're going to do is we're going to go over to onStart, and we're going to put our set number, and we're going to change 0 to 5. And what this is doing is it's basically taking the variable and giving it a value. So when we start, let's ignore this. Yeah, when we start, it's going to set our number to a certain value. In this case, it's 5. So you can change this again depending on what you want. Now what we're going to do is we don't need the forever block. So let's just delete that. Let's go into input, and let's use button A pressed, and let's pull out another and modify that to button B pressed. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use button A to add and button B to subtract. Again, you can switch this up depending on what you want to do. So we're going to go into variables. We're going to use the change function. And the reason we use change and not set is when we do set, it'll set it to a certain value. So imagine you want to subtract. Sorry, I'll just change that first to -1. So imagine instead of saying on button B pressed, we do on button B pressed set number to number 4. If you do this, it'll work great the first time. You'll start with the number 5, and then you press it, it'll become the number 4. But when you press it again, it won't become the number 3. It'll become the number 4, 4, 4, 4, etc., etc., etc. It won't change no matter how many times you press it. That's why we don't use that block, and we use the change block. So the change block iterates that by 1 or -1 or whatever value. I mean, you can change this to -2. That's fine as well. For the next block, we'll use onShake, and we'll click the shake, and we'll change this to logo up. Again, you can use any of the various options here, but we're just going to use logo up, and we'll pull another one of that down, and we'll change that one to logo down. And what we're going to do next is multiply and divide. For multiply and divide, we can't use change, we have to use set. So I'm going to bring set in, then I'm going to go into math. When I go into math, there are all these options, and I'm just going to take the multiply option. I'm going to drop it right there. Oops, I'll just tidy it up a little bit so it's easy to understand what's happening. So again, you can move these blocks around and it won't change your code. So yeah, I bring this and I go into set number to 0 times 0. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring out the number block, drop it in the first 0, and we're going to multiply by, again, any number. I'm just going to select 2. What's happening here is actually quite interesting. So remember this container that I just used, this container analogy. Imagine this number, like over here it starts with 5, right? So imagine you haven't modified it, the number is still 5. So you have the number 5 inside your container. So what this is doing here is it's kind of working in reverse. It's going to multiply your number, which is 5. It's going to take it, multiply it by 2, as we did over here, and store that. It's going to take that out of the container, and now we have the number 10, right? And it's going to put the number 10 back into the exact same container. So it sounds a little confusing because, wait, I thought this container had the number 5. Now we're storing the number 10. How can you modify it, or how does that work? It uses something called temporary memory. So it's going to take the value of this, which is 5, store it in temporary memory, modify it to the number 10, and then after that, it's going to use a temporary memory and put it back into the main memory, which is the variable that we created, the number 10. And we can do the same thing for logo down. And here's a secret. You can just, or like a hint, a shortcut. If you right click, or on an iPad or on a tablet, you have to kind of long press. If you long press on a touchscreen device or right click, you can hit duplicate, bring this down, and we can just do the same thing for division. And in fact, we can, make this more interesting and make this divide by 2 and multiply maybe by 3. And that's all great, but remember we have inputs and outputs. How do we output the number? Because right now we're modifying all these values, but we're not outputting it to the microbit. So what we need to do is, the easiest way to output the number that we have is to show it on the screen, right? So I'm going to bring a forever block from basic. So I click on basic, drag forever out. And this is quite interesting. What we can do is we can do show number. So I throw show number there. And instead of clicking show number 0, I'm going to do show number. So now what it's going to do is number over here is referring to the same variable over here. So the microbit doesn't need to think. If the code tells it to show number, the microbit is just going to blindly grab into this container that it has, take whatever number it has, and just show it on the screen. So in a way, the microbit is not really doing any work. It doesn't have to use memory to remember what the number is. It can just go into the container, pick out the number that's stored, and throw it on the screen. And that's our code. Let's flash it on. Let's download it. We can save it. So let's save it as calculator. I'm gonna hit save, and it's gonna download. And once you've done that, let's go and put it on the microbit, and I'll show you what it looks like. As a small aside, sorry I forgot to mention this. The microbit has an issue when you use the spelling that I use, which is capital N number. So before what I had was this number. Please don't use that. It's gonna throw it off. It's a small compatibility error. You can use any other word, and that should be okay. So how you change this in case you didn't use another word is you click on number. You can click anywhere number is referred to. Just click on number, and there's an option called rename variable. Click on rename variable, and we can change it to lowercase number, and that in fact works fine. Or you can change it to anything you want. So I'll just call it number and click OK. And as you can see, all those exclamation marks go away. Yeah, just make sure you don't have that, and then your code should be ready to flash. Okay guys, so we're gonna test out our code. I've flashed it to the microbit, and you guys can do the same. So I'm gonna plug it in. As soon as I plug it in, we'll see the number 5. So I'm gonna press button A. Yeah, I'll bring it closer to the screen. Let's press button A. and you can see it became 6. Press it again, 7. Let's do the reverse. Subtract 1. Oh, I pressed it twice there. Oh, sorry, it was -2. So we're subtracting 2 now, so it becomes 1, and I'll bring it back up to up just a little bit. So yeah, now let's press 2, 3, 4. Now let's try logo up. I'll do logo up, and as you can see, it just multiplied 4 times 3, because that's what code I had written, right? To multiply it by 3 if the logo was up. So now it's displaying 12. I'm gonna do logo down, and it's gonna show the number 6, because for me logo down was divide by 2. You guys might have slightly different numbers and slightly different results, but now it's 6. So I can subtract by 1 and make it, oh sorry, subtract by 2 and make it 4, subtract by 2 again, make it 2, I'll add 1, I'll add 1 again, then I'll divide by 2, so I'll just bring this down. Oh sorry, that was multiplied by 3, my bad. Divide by 2, 6, subtract down to 4, divide again by 2, becomes 2. So yeah, you guys can see how variables are used to make sort of like a calculator app for your microbit. So yeah.